Welcome to the closed session, How to Get Paid in Silicon Valley, with your host, Tom Chavez and Vivek Vedya.
Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of Season 3 of the closed session. My name is Tom.
And I'm Vivek Vedya.
We are going to pick up in a way where we left off. In the last episode, we were talking about this craftsmanship, not critique approach that we have to collaborative company building. We've said it's all about people. So in this session, we want to get into the guts of what it makes to be a great co-founder.
That's right. We're going to tell potential co-founders what we're looking for and describe how our craft, not critique approach results in collaborative company building.
So everybody in Silicon Valley is talking a lot about mentorship and coaching. It's a buzzy thing. Everybody has coaches, which is great. Coaching isn't the whole enchilada.
That's right.
You got to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the approach that we have in mind over here is one where we lock arms with co-founders. And of course, there is learning by doing, but it's all about getting into the dirt under your fingernails and connecting to the grist of company building.
That's right. And it's also our commitment to continuous improvement. We don't claim to have figured everything out. We're also works in progress. So through this process, we're learning and we want to improve ourselves as well.
By the way, we've said that along the way, like we need to learn too. Part of what we just need from the job is to show up at work every day, learn some new things, make your brain hurt. We do that in partnership with the co-founders that we're lucky to work with.
Yep.
In the olden times, there was this idea of an apprentice.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe these days people worry about the word. It feels, I don't know, it depositions the apprentice, and we don't like caste systems. But the concept was a good one, right?
Yeah.
Because what it establishes the idea of tutelage and partnership between somebody who knows some stuff, wants to share it with somebody who wants to learn that stuff.
Yeah, and the core idea over there, or the crux over there, which at least appealed to me, was this idea of partnership. Again, going back to what we just said about continuous improvement, apprenticeship, the way we see it, is a partnership that we create between ourselves and the co-founders that we bring on board.
That's right. So in a sense, we're kind of creating a guild, not a cult. It's a guild committed to the craft of company building. It's all about people, and co-founders are fundamental. So let's get into it. What are we looking for in the core disposition of a co-founder? You want to maybe give us a quick recap from the sort of key things we talked about?
There were 4 things, right? There was grit, there was humility, organized thinking, and clock speed. Why these 4 things? Because we have good reasons for all 4, right? Grit, because company building from scratch is not for the meek of spirit, Tom. You know that, right? So we look for co-founders that can show up and can literally take a punch.
We've seen a lot of co-founders, right, who had what venture capitalists like to call the pedigree. Right? They have the training and the education. They're show horses. They trot them out from the stables. They look great, right? And yet, when the first curveballs or the first kicks to the gut happen in company building, they bravely turn their tails and flee.
Yeah.
You need grit. You need to be able to take a punch. You need to be able to stick with it.
And then related to that is humility, right? Startups are built on strong convictions and loosely held opinions, right?
Okay.
So you need to be humble about the fact that you don't know everything.
It's another failure mode we've seen, right? The reason we focus on these things is because we've seen the perils of what happens when you don't have these qualities.
Correct.
Co-founders who show up too cocky, too convinced, too certain.
Yep.
It's always a path to perdition.
It is. We've talked about the certainty to knowledge ratio in the past, right? And we're looking for people who have really low certainty to knowledge ratios,
That's
right?
right.
So
organized thinking, what's that about?
I think, look, there are a lot of people who have the technical chops, perhaps, to build products, right? But can they organize all of that complicated thinking into simple concepts
That's right.
that can be communicated up and down the stack, left to right, to various stakeholders? That's what we mean by organized thinking.
There are a lot of great technicians who are virtuosic in certain swim lanes where they reside.
Yeah.
What we have in mind here with organized thinking is the ability to kind of come up a level, maybe go to the balcony and see the whole sweep.
Yeah.
Connect the pieces of the solution, because a lot of this is about systems of systems. In fact, when we're building our systems of systems. So you need somebody who can kind of taxonomize the elements of the total solution, think clearly about the whole thing, while still going deep when they need to.
That's right. That's right. We talk about dot connecting, right? Dot connecting as a learnable skill. It's not perhaps not teachable, but it is learnable. And that's what we mean by organized thinking.
Yeah, and the final one is clock speed. And here we're going to be careful, right? Because I think sometimes it's a subject for a separate podcast, the way people dwell on matters of IQ and standardized testing. And there's a lot of clever test takers out there. God bless them. So we're not going to get crazy about this stuff, but there is an element to this about clock speed, which is about just keeping up and learning fast and being able to process information and connect those dots you talked about at the speed of light.
Yeah, I think that's really it, right? It's the ability to process information as quickly as possible to figure out what's going on and then figure out the implications of what the information is presented means, right? That doesn't necessarily require high test scores, as you're pointing out, but you do need the ability to process things at a certain clip.
That's right. So those are the breadcrumbs we talked about in a prior podcast, and that's the sort of table setting for what we want to talk about now when we get into the product co-founder. Let's dwell on this now. So the first hire we make when we're standing up a new company is a product co-founder. Why do we do it that way, Vivek?
So because, the thesis, the company thesis formation thesis that we have at Superset is all about starting with the product, right? What are we going to build? What problems are we trying to solve? And more importantly, how do we connect all of those problems and solutions into a broader product strategy? Because we want to create large, ambitious visions that we want to execute on.
That's right. So look, we've been at this for a while, and I think it's safe to say 20, 25 years ago, product wasn't necessarily a thing. In the 90s, when you were starting a company, right, it was somebody with an idea, and then frequently venture capitalists would bring in a VP of engineering.
Correct.
To code it up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I suggest that sort of in the early 2000s, there was this tilt that suddenly happened where people realized, wait a minute, between the engineers who are coding the thing and the person with the idea or the vision who's beating the drums and trying to get people to do it, there's this important middle ground that is really the realm of great product, right?
Yep.
Google, we got to have a quick moment of appreciation for them. They launched this APM, Associate Product Management function, and it became a discipline, right, that Google created. I think a lot of companies followed it. Certainly from my own vantage point, it's clear that there's this appreciation now for like, how do you explain, see the whole product, but in an analytic way. It's not a product marketing hand-wavy thing. It's an engineering undertaking. But it's not necessarily encumbered by all of the technical details around how you're going to code it up.
Correct. And we'll cover this in detail in another podcast. But what we're talking about here is the something in the middle, which is in between the product marketing narrative around what the company does, etc., and the Jira tickets that need to be filed to actually build the product. What sits in the middle? That's what we mean by product management.
Now you're taking me to a thing, so let's pick that up, because those Jira tickets and the catalog of all of the features and the things that are broken, it matters. And a good product leader needs to be willing to get into the nuts and bolts of that. The challenge that we see is that there are a lot of folks out there who want to be product people. They carry themselves with that idea. They put it on their resume, and we've seen a lot of these folks come in, and they're just they're feature function loggers. Right. They catalog all of these things, and they keep a list. What's problematic with just that? If that's the whole thing, what's the problem there?
You miss the forest for the trees, right? And so we want our product leaders to be strategists and empaths, right? So you really need to be empathetic towards the customers whom you're solving whom you're solving these problems, right? And you need to be able to connect it all together in a cohesive product strategy. I think that's what these feature loggers oftentimes miss out, is that, these 10 things need to be done. Why? How do they connect to a broader story? What's the overall broader strategic narrative that we're taking to market? They miss out on that.
We've touched on this briefly in a prior podcast, but we have this discipline that we adhere to around typically 3 stages for a company's build out. And it's all product centric, right? So for example, catch the data privacy security company, 3 stages: comply, control, secure, in that order. That's the build out, It's the narrative, it's the positioning and posture of the company. It defines everything that we do with customers, and of course, it lays out the product
groundwork,
strategy, right? Now, when we do that, to your point about how features and functions and logs of tickets and so on aren't enough, you have to establish sort of the post conditions of stage one, right, as the preconditions for stage two. So there you have it. The product strategist is seeing that whole sweep, right? And they're laying it out in a blueprint, ideally defined at the founding of the company.
At the founding of the company. And I think this is the one kind of big thing we learned from our own experience building Crux is that we crafted that product strategy while we were sitting at your kitchen table many, many years ago. It really helped us.
Right.
And I think that's one discipline we're actually pretty non-negotiable about in the company build-outs that we're carrying out at Superset.
Now, to build a little suspense, because we're going to have a special guest come in here in a minute. We just had a very serious jam session with him and other members of our team in this company. We're looking at that 3-stage model, and there's an element to the 3rd stage where we don't know exactly
how we're going to get there,
how it plays out.
Yeah.
We don't know point to point. And that's okay, right? Because we have conviction that if we're laying out those initial steps, using this organized thinking approach, right, you're gonna have the sort of flywheel effect where the company as a learning organism is figuring out how to get to those endpoints.
That's exactly right.
Right? And we're very comfortable and Zen-like about it. You can be a little cocky, right, in stage 3. In fact, if you're not being just a little bit grandiose, you're not doing it right.
Correct. Yeah, you by definition you have to be grandiose, and by definition there has to be more uncertainty the further out you're looking on the out on the horizon, because you have more information about stage 1 right now, right? And what you learn in stage 1 will inform stage 2, but you still need to make those bets.
That's right.
As to where are we going to go, and that's what the strategy is all about.
100%. So I said we're going to build a little suspense here and have our product co-founder come on in here. We want to interview our special guest. Elvis is in the building. Give us a second. We're going to reset. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
We are back. I told you we were going to take a little break, reset. We had a special guest. Elvis was in the building. We're eager to have him here now with us. Vivek?
Yeah, and we have Pankaj Rajan with us, who is our co-founder and head of product and engineering at MarkovML. Before joining Markov, Pankaj was at Amazon in the Alexa group. And then before that, he was an ML architect at Walmart. Welcome, Pankaj.
Thanks, Vivek and Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here, Pankaj. Listen, before the break, we were talking about product co-founders. You are our product co-founder at a new company called MarkovML. We're really excited about it. We were talking about what it takes to be a great product co-founder. And one of the questions that frequently comes up now in this context is, well, what about industry expertise, right? And you kind of fit a very kind of well-understood model where you come to this undertaking and you have so much experience in this domain. Can you tell us a little bit about how you accumulated that experience and how does it become relevant to what we're building out at Markov?
The experience started off mostly like because of passion, right? You have to be passionate about something and just do it because you like doing that. So started doing machine learning, when I was in college, 2002. Was fascinated by, a robot landing on Mars, like how an autonomous robot would work, millions of miles away from here. Got fascinated about image processing in general, and spent like almost all my undergrad year learning about maths and machine learning in different forms. Like sometimes you don't understand what's happening. It was, way beyond my expertise at that time. But then you have to persevere. You have to learn. And did go to some good ML schools. Learned more about machine learning. Ended up in the US.
Arguably, at a time when machine learning wasn't even necessarily a term of art.
Yeah. Machine learning was not a term of art. We used to call it like soft computing at that point of time. And, you have to just, assign a label to it, like what you're doing. And it was artificial neural networks, not deep learning. Which was kind of, the name just went away.
That's right. Yeah. So you've been, as we were saying, you've been at Amazon and you've been at Walmart working on complex machine learning problems and products, right? So how are those roles different from what you're doing at Markov now?
At the high level, big companies like Walmart and Amazon, like they are both huge companies, and there are pros and cons. The thing is that most of the improvements there are incremental improvements, even though they may be looked at as innovations, but they are incremental improvements. Um, and then the entire focus is focused on what you can do within the constraints of these big companies, their revenue model, their messaging, what they want to accomplish. And even if you fail, there, it's okay. I mean, you may not get a hike, you may learn something, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a blip. Startup is different because you really need to have a point of view, the way you want the world to look like, right? And you don't know, as you know, a lot of times you don't know that. You just have a hypothesis, and every time you have to go and negate that hypothesis. Now, and every time, and you have to be very deliberate about it, because it kind of hurts your ego that this is the world I want to see, but it's not happening. It's not happening because that's very important. And when you know the because, then you have to go and critique it and see like how can it evolve into something you're passionate about, but more importantly, is it a problem? Does it solve a problem that your customers will pay for? And before they pay, do they love it? Like they won't pay for something that they don't love.
Before you joined us, Vivek talked about great product leadership as strategy plus empathy,
Mhm.
right? And so what I hear you getting to is this question of, well, how do I empathize with the needs of my users,
Hmm.
the people who
Hmm.
are going to adopt this
Mhm,
technology?
mhm.
It's a trap, right? That
Yeah.
I think great techies frequently fall into.
Mhm.
Customers, use
Yeah,
cases,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah, blah. Who cares? No. That's the good stuff. And you can't really be great at that as a product leader unless you're constantly, in your mind's eye at least, empathizing with the end users of the technology while you're down here at 9 decimal points grappling with an extremely technical issue.
Yep. And I think the biggest distinction is also understanding difference between want and needs. If you go and ask customer what they want, they're going to tell you the moon, and that's good. That's good. By the time you build this moon, they want something new.
Right.
So you always have to understand what they need. And as a techie, you always fell into this trap of what they want versus what they need.
Right.
Because there's a subtle difference between the two.
Hey, so we're talking a lot about the big companies, Amazon and Walmart, but before Walmart, you were in a startup, right? And forgive
Mhm.
me if I get the chronology
Mhm.
not quite right, but let's talk about the startup
Mhm,
because
mhm, mhm.
you've got scar
Yep.
tissue in all ways.
Yep.
Talk about that startup experience. What's similar between that and what you're doing now? What's
Mhm.
different?
Mhm, mhm. So before Walmart, I was in two startups. Both were legendary machine learning startups, like constantly coming in top 10 AI companies in the world. And I'm really proud to be there. Learned a lot from some of the amazing mentors and that I got, like Gurjeet and Ashutosh. Um,
Shout out to them.
yeah. I mean, they're great people. So the experience is, when you join a company as an early employee, the focus is to enable founders' vision, right? You can complement it, but at the end of the day, it's founders' vision. And and you learn a lot, like how people, founders think, how to create a business out of a technology problem. So both of these companies were solving really, really hard problems, which are like unsupervised learning and smart homes. Not an easy problem,
Right.
very hard problems. But what does it mean? So how can you build technology that solves real problem? So that was my biggest learning at these two places, and especially working close with these people. Walmart was a whole different experience because now you're taking that experience into a big giant company and you're driving change, which is hard. But these experiences helped me to make that change at a Walmart scale. And the credit goes to my bosses as well, like building that trust and enabling that. But after having aggregated all this experience, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Right? This is something you just know that you want. It's not something somebody tells you and you become an entrepreneur. It's like you inherently you subconsciously want to do something.
Mm.
An entrepreneur is not about making money. It's not about being a CEO or a CTO or any of these titles. It's about creating something when nothing exists. And I always had that urge. And so I decided to start a company. And that's where the learning part comes in, because when you are in this cocoon, in the startups, when you are in, like, a lot of things are kind of sorted out. In big companies, even though, they are incremental improvements, there's still this safety cushion. You think, okay, you build technology, it will sell.
Right.
And that was the biggest learning, like going and doing my own startup. It's understanding, hey, this is what I wanted. I wanted to shape the worldview towards a technology. World needs solutions to the problems. So it took me like 2-3 years to understand. But we built great products. We built great teams. We were able to reach a point where, there was a problem that customers were willing to pay for. But then there's also one thing that you have to realize is there's a product market fit and there is a problem founder fit. I realized the founder product fit was not there. And the COVID came, which was, okay, this is the time and to take a break and, plan something new.
So let's talk about that, something new, right? Like we've been working together for almost a year now. Actually, it'll be a year in April. And we also, before you joined us, we talked about the process that we use to kind of collaborate with our co-founders and how this model of apprenticeship exists. This idea of a guild that we have, right? So, and we talked about some of the frameworks and techniques we use over there. So we just had recently, like a few weeks ago, we had a whiteboard session where we talked about the product strategy and company strategy for Markov. And there were some debates, right? There were some things that were not clear to us that became clear to us. So can you describe how that process was from your perspective? What did you learn and how that process kind of has helped you with your experience at Superset?
Definitely. I mean, people who know me, you Tom and Vivek especially, like, I like debates. It's not about proving a point. It's about learning, learning about a point of view. And these debates mostly have been around that. You have to come up with an open mind. You have to be vulnerable and you have to be open for critique. But at the same time, you don't have to be afraid of presenting a point of view.
That's right.
And you have to be very direct and blunt about it. But it's about the problem. It's about the debate, the topic that we are having. It's not about the person. It's not about anything else. It's not about the strategy. And I think through those debates, you get clarity of thought. The clarity of thought is very important.
That's right.
And the alignment is also very important. Like how you align with the overall vision. So sometimes, I always say this thing, right? Destination can be same, but the paths can be different. And we have to make sure even the path that we take is kind of aligned, because otherwise, we won't reach the destination. So as a company, as a team, as a group of co-founders, it's very important that we communicate the same message. And those debate sessions, those discussions, those whiteboardings are bringing about that not consensus, but kind of clarity of vision. And we learn from each other, right?
That's right.
Like, I always like, when we go into nitty-gritty, like Vivek and I are talking about the architecture, Tom kind of says, okay, I got it. Now, this is the big picture, right? It kind of condenses the entire message about what is the message that we want to, tell to the customers for the company, which is okay, which makes me think and then, take a step back and, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
No, and I see you, Pankaj, as somebody with sort of calm, steely resolve. When you have your point of view, you put a stake in the ground and you don't roll over easy, which is great, right? Because he's a fiery personality. I have some opinions. As you're pointing out, the good stuff happens when we're chopping it up, debating it, fire testing it. No one's getting defensive or worried about whether or not they matter or not. We want to get to not the truth, because we're engineers. Engineers don't care about truth, but we want to get to something that works, right?
That's true.
And it's the playing it backwards and forwards and testing all of those assumptions, seeing where they take us, rolling it back, revising our initial conditions. That's where the hardcore work in product, and it's not just product strategy, but product blueprinting, right? Because at the end of that session, we really do have, in some of the earlier stages, right, it's probably a little more hand-wavy.
Yeah.
We're intuiting some things, but we're not quite sure.
Yeah.
Now we've hung at least 3 or 4 extra decimal points off that thing after the end of that session.
Yeah, absolutely. So just continuing in that vein and perhaps exploring a slightly different aspect of working in the Superset Hive as a co-founder with us, what were you most surprised about when you came to Superset?
I think I wasn't too surprised because we had a lot of conversations, with Vivek and Tom. It was not like
We dated for a long while.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was not like from the point we started having a conversation, from the point I joined, there were several conversations. I knew that I'm getting into a place where I would get the right mentorship. B, I'll get to work with people who really believe in what they say, which is very important. For me, like, two things matter the most. One is trust, and the second part is openness. And these two things, were there in Superset. Like, we were open about what we are doing, what we want to accomplish, and where we want to get. And we are also open about, hey, it's not about what we intend to do. It's not about execution. It's about building. There's a difference between execution and building, or creation. Creation is the it's a preprocessor of execution, and that's the creation part is where a lot of companies fail because they're unable to have a consensus on what to create.
Right.
I think that's where you need the partners, and that's what I got at Superset.
Listen, we also talked before you joined us about what we need from the journey, and it's learning in all ways. Yes, there's a kind of mentorship by doing, right? But it's also important to us that you're teaching us every day of the week. In fact, I'm thinking back to that session. There was a thing with Monte Carlo algorithms from 20 years ago and probabilistically approximately correct techniques that I was fascinated by. Oh, wow. You turf it up. I didn't know that people are doing that now in the realm of what we call data vitals.
Yep.
One example among thousands, right, where you're showing up, not just with a strong point of view, but with an awful lot of industry context and knowledge that is immediately relevant to the build out. So that's the good stuff. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of put this in the context of the broader Superset model, like for me personally, across, like if I look at 5 or 6 companies at Superset, they're all using different tech stacks,
right,
for their own very good reasons, right? And so for me, it's a fascinating, magnificent learning opportunity. Like, why do you make these decisions, and why are you doing this versus that? Well, we used to do things this way, but look, this much has changed. So it's been great learning from all of our portfolio companies.
That's right.
For me personally as well.
Hey, we've talked about trust and openness. So this is a place of trust right here, right now. I got to ask you, who do you like more between me and Vivek? And by the way, before you answer, just know, like, it's a very career limiting thing. To give the wrong answer. But who do you like more?
Yeah. It depends. Like what I want at that moment.
I'm actually very, very impressed that you waited so long to ask this question.
I am a paragon of self-regulation.
Yeah. Well done, Tom. Well done. I'm so proud of you.
I don't know how I do it.
So proud of you.
Yeah. It depends. It depends on like what I need to get done. And it's like,
so he's a politician.
Yeah.
But great product also requires great persuasion and communication. Did you see how he just did that, ladies and gentlemen? He just straddled that line so perfectly.
That's right. And he made it about us, right? Like, we started giving each other all sorts of grief about why didn't you ask the question before and whatnot. Well done, Pankaj. Well done.
Yeah.
Well, listen, as we wrap it up here, let's. It's really terrific to have you with us. Thank you, Pankaj, for coming and sharing your perspective. We've said mentorship is a two-way street, and that's a biggie for us. We're learning, you're learning, we're locking arms. By the way, when you talked about the prior experience and now, your fingerprints are all over this thing. It's not us coming up with something, bringing tablets down a mountain, and no. This thing that we're building is your thing, right? That's important to the overall approach. And I think as we roll forward, what I'm also excited about here in this conversation today is we've said people, product, customers in that order, people first.
Yep. Absolutely, right. People first. And just to kind of add to what you were saying about mentorship being a two-way street, we also, Tom, you and I have learned along the way to give space. And to Pankaj's point, like he felt strongly that his startup establishing the vision was very important to him. So he's had a huge role to play.
That's right.
In defining the vision for what we're doing at Markov.
Yep.
Well, and let's also, don't get a big head, Pankaj, but Pankaj is also kind of creating the gold standard now.
That's right.
At Superset. For
Setting the bar
great,
high.
Great. Yeah, it's a very high bar. So thank you for that. Listen, really great to have you with us and to have this conversation about product and people and how we make it work together at Superset. So
That's right. So thank you, Pankaj.
I'm glad to be here.
thanks to all of you listening. We hope to see you soon in the next episode.
All right. Have a good one.
Be well.